Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Bears Core Studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about what in the world is happening moving forward with Magic when it comes to a certain divisive card type, I would say. One that there's definitely people on each side of the community that like it, don't like it, and a decision that was made recently within the past year that already is kind of, well, up in the air as to how it's being executed. Let's just say that. So all that said, let's jump into Planeswalkers in Magic moving forward. And actually, I believe it was on the preview panel at MagicCon Barcelona where this was actually released. The information was released, I believe, by Mark, that Planeswalkers starting with Wilds of Eldraine, and I think Mark might have misspoken during this, but basically said that like there's only going to be one Planeswalker per set moving forward. I think Mark might have misspoken and like was recorrected later. Essentially, it was like in general, there's going to be one moving forward. I think I bet the Blogatog post at some point, but essentially, and let's go to this really quick, if I can edit this correctly and get it up. But yeah, I mean, since Wilds of Eldraine, we had Ashiok, the only Planeswalker in Wilds of Eldraine, Quintorius, the only Planeswalker in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and then Kaya, the only Planeswalker in Murders at Karlov Manor. So those three sets did follow that trend. And again, whether you're on one side of the community or the other on Planeswalkers, and whether you want a lot of them, not a lot of them, we'll talk about the numbers here in a little bit. It seems to be the trend that they are, well, after the, de-sparking or whatever it was in all the Phyrexian stuff, essentially, they are intentionally making it so there's less Planeswalkers coming about in sets moving forward. Now, that being said, again, Mark did say, again, and people misspeak all the time. I misspeak all the time, so I'm not trying to say that Mark made a giant mistake or anything like that, but obviously it wasn't the case because, hey, moving forward in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, it was like, okay, we got Oko pretty early in spoiler season, and it's like, okay, cool, Oko, and then all of a sudden, like, later on, it's like, oh, by the way, Jace is here too. It's like, okay, we thought you said just one per set, but we had two in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, so again, I think Mark changed, didn't change, but might have misspoken, and essentially in a Blogatog post, we can see like an actual question, and actually usually people have trouble kind of seeing it, and it's kind of confusing. I think the blog should show it a little bit different, but basically, under the current one Planeswalker per set rule, could we ever get something like the Royal Scions, where there are multiple characters on one card? Mark's response highlighted in blue. We could note the one Planeswalker per set rule is the current default. As Outlaws of Thunder Junction shows, we can have more than one. So again, Mark on that initial stream might have accidentally said, just 1%. Obviously, that's a bit loose, and there can be some differences. And as we are seeing, with those differences, we started off with, 3 in a row, sets in a row that were just one each set. Then with Outlaws of Thunder Junction, we got 2 in the set, so I guess twice as many. Wow. But I mean, like 1 versus 2, it's not really that big of a difference. That being said, with, when's it come out? June, I think is when. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but I believe in June, it's going to be Modern Horizons 3. We actually saw, actually this is this year, but we're going to be seeing a Johnny Nakatel Pariah, which technically is a flip walker, so like, does that count or not? I think it would count as a Planeswalker in the set. Let me in the comments below what your thoughts are on that, but we saw that there's a Johnny, and if you haven't seen my episode recently where I talked about the leaks, and yes, these are leaks, they're not confirmed, but we also got, I believe, Grist, we got Tamio, we got Soren Markov, and we got, oh goodness, I'm going to mess up, Ral. There we go. We had 4 other Planeswalkers. Again, this, I believe, is a 2-color. We had the 2-color Flipwalkers, essentially, and all the other ones, I believe, are also 2-color Flipwalkers. Those, again, are leaks. They are not confirmed, but that would make sense kind of with a cycle of these, essentially. So it could be just a big, ruse by someone else on the internet that is just trying to, pull the rug out from under everyone, just being like, haha, I made fake Planeswalkers, and I took grainy photos of them, and I distributed them. That being said, when it comes to these kind of leaks, and they look pretty legitimate, typically, I'd say 99% of the time, they actually are legitimate, so I'm going on the basis that they are legitimate. And in that case, again, like we, this year already, are going to be having, of course, the first set with Kaya, now Murders Call Manor, only Planeswalker. Then in Outlaws Thunder Junction, we had 2. And then in Modern Horizons 3, we've got 5. Now, I guess there's some clarification things to happen with that, too, from Mark and those at Wizards. Like, okay, when you're saying 1% moving forward is the general rule, Does that include, again, like a like non-standard set like Modern Horizons 3, like outside of just the the normal sets essentially throughout the year? Does that count? Does that not count? How does that go? How does that work essentially? And kind of with that, is it even a good thing that we're reducing the number of planeswalkers? I guess I should kind of give you my perspective on this first, just so, and I'm just being completely upfront and honest. I started playing Magic a long time ago, and actually I left Magic before Planeswalkers actually even came about. And then when I came back, I was like, what in the world are these things? Like, what is this? So, essentially, I am, an old school Magic player, and Planeswalkers aren't my favorite thing. I'm going to be honest. I don't like playing with them all that much in my own decks, personally. Completely fine with other players playing with them. But yeah, I'm not too upset that they're going to be going down to 1%. Now, what reasons they might have for actually making this decision, we'll talk about here in a little bit. But if we look throughout the years again, and actually, let me see if I can pull this up too. Here's a little chart I made. Look at that. Wow, really fancy. Yes, so back in 2007, I believe, was when the very first Planeswalkers came out. So I quit right before that, apparently. I think that was in Lorwyn, right? And I think I stopped right in Mirrodin, I think. Anyways, so we had looks like 4 or 5, I believe, and very steady until 2014 went up a little bit, then down a little bit, and then things just skyrocketed. 2019, we had 63 or so Planeswalkers. Absolutely absurd. I mean, just how it skyrocketed. And then recently it's kind of tapered off a little bit, but still the average in most recent years was around 20 or so, a little over 20. So going from 4 or 5 in a year all the way up to 63, then down to around 20 or so. Yeah, we're cutting back quite a bit, going down to just 1%. And if it is 1%, that's 6 or 7 in a year, probably. But again, with there being certain exceptions, like we've seen so far already. I mean, we're already at technically, 3 this year. Johnny is going to be coming out Modern Horizons, plus potentially, again, leaks. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, but check out that episode to see those cards for yourself. Potentially already at 8 Planeswalkers so far, so that'd already be over the obviously over the 1% rule, but over the average of what things were back when it was 4 or 5 in a year in total. So yeah, it's kind of this weird middle ground that we're going to be ending up, I feel where, the average, or what you should be expecting, I guess, is 1%, but I guess don't be surprised when it's not 1%. So it's pretty interesting. I guess if you look back again, last year we had 20 again, just a lot. It did slow down at the end of the year. We would have had a lot more if they didn't kind of institute that 1% rule for those last 2 sets of the year, essentially. But then we had, 21 before that, including, and this I will say is including ones like Urza, Planeswalker, ones like that. So again, Flipwalkers are counting in this as well. Ones like the Urza, which is a combination card, they have the, what do you call it? A meld card, essentially. That would count too. I mean, going back further, 22 and 2021, 23. I mean, you can just see kind of just the evolution of how we just got a ton. I mean, even having, again, 2 Rals in the same set, or not in the same year, I should say. 2 Vraskas, because you also had, the Precon ones as well, or the build-around ones. And then also, Planeswalkers as commanders, and that's kind of, part of this as well. 18, 16, 11, 14, 8. So this is kind of where, things started to really creep up, I feel because before that, we were at 7, 7, 6, 4, 4. I mean, remember the days back when it was just 4 a year? 5 a year? This was the first one. There you go. Jace Beleren, all the original ones, right? So basically, it's just kind of an interesting thing on how Planeswalkers kind of have evolved in Magic and then devolved recently as well. I think it's because they kind of overdid it a little bit, at a certain point where players just kind of got a little tired of it. It's also design space that I believe that they've said is kind of it's a limited design space where it's really hard to design these effectively and efficiently, and also not just do a bunch of repeat things, because you are putting, again, 3 abilities on each one, essentially, if not more. Yeah, it's an interesting space, and it's one that, again, some players really enjoy, some don't enjoy. I tend to think, again, I'm not going to say it's a problematic thing, but it's something that can be a bit of a kind of mental load for the entire table when it comes to someone playing a deck that has all Planeswalkers in it, and you're trying to, maybe that player, sure, can know what all their Planeswalkers are doing, and they should know what they're doing, and that's great. But when it comes to the rest of the table, trying to evaluate, threats and that kind of stuff, and being okay, what does that one do again? You've got 5 Planeswalkers in play. That's 15 abilities in total. That's different. I have to keep track of so many things going on with that, and that's completely fair and fine. But again, it's just not the experience that I think some people want potentially. So to play with in every single game. That being said, Planeswalkers are actually, like Super Friends X are actually a pretty popular deck out there. So that's interesting on how this actually impacts Commander in that way, because let's see. So we've got, looks like the most popular decks, right? Here we go. There's 5, there's 10, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18th most popular theme on EDH Rec. I guess this is not including tribal themes, so keep that in mind. That being said, yeah, 40,000 decks to its name. That's pretty popular for Planeswalker strategies out there. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind, that how this is going to impact that going forward. Now, obviously, there might be some like Planeswalker support going forward when it comes to like other kinds of cards that can work with it. Obviously, like proliferate effects work really well with it. We got a ton last year. That being said, moving forward, there's probably less Planeswalker support too in general, and obviously less Planeswalkers be adding those decks. That obviously you have a lot of Planeswalkers already to choose from if you got a Planeswalker tribal deck, so keep that in mind. When it comes to kind of, not replacements, I'm not going to say, but kind of a replacement for Planeswalkers, in my opinion, and others' opinions, well, like, Sagas are kind of like fixed Planeswalkers in a way, because like it takes out the options, and it makes it easier for other players at the table to kind of understand what the progression of the card's got to be and like what's going to happen. Instead of like a Planeswalker, again, you have all those different options. It's hard to keep track of all the things. These are more progressed, where it's like, okay, like Fall of the Thran, all right, I guess Fall of the Thran's not a good example because not played all that much. Let's go History of Benalia. Pay 2/2, White Knight Creature Vigilance. The second one, the exact same thing. The third one, Knight Control +2/+1 until end turn. And then it's done. So, like, this at the table is typically, again, there's ways to, like, use and abuse it where you can, like, blink it, get it back, that kind of stuff. But, like, typically, you know what is going to be happening with this if you're the opponents, and it's easier to track that. And you know, there's no, like, decisions on it, okay? It is, like, it does this, and then it does this, and it's gone. It's just a more kind of solved Planeswalker versus Planeswalkers, again, are just, it's a mental load for the table in a way. So, that's just kind of how some players view them, essentially, and taking away some of that mental load, it might be a good thing going forward. That being said, that might not be the only reason why that is happening. I mean, again, we only got 2 Planeswalkers in Thunder Junction. We also got 43, commanders, essentially, right, out of that legendary creatures. So, some players' explanation out there as to why Planeswalkers are going down is because Wizards wants the design space to ensure that they are still doing a good amount of legendary creatures in there. Now, that's kind of a similar but different topic, because they've also said that they're going to be decreasing, at least in main sets that are non-Universes Beyond. For some reason, they need Universes Beyond to have a ton of legendaries, because we need 5-6 Gandalfs, right? That's just my opinion. I'm, of course, inserting into this. But basically, they need more design space to be able to utilize those legendary effects, those legendary permanents for creatures, because typically legendary Planeswalkers are not commanders, except for the ones that are specifically named as commanders, which would not be happening in main sets, essentially. So it's an interesting space that we live in right now, again, where, again, Mark initially said just 1, and that was people's reaction to it. Like, okay, only 1 per set? Goodness, okay. But it also allows them to focus on making that Planeswalker really, really good for, the flavor of that set, for what it does, and just kind of focus on that, versus like, oh, okay, we can't use this ability because we already used that one before. We already used this before. We can't use that again in this year. And being able to just focus, again, on a limited design space and doing it effectively and efficiently and making them distinct, kind of like how they used to be when they started, instead of being like, oh, okay, we've seen the +1, all right, yeah, that's protecting the Planeswalker. The minus is like destroying something, and the ultimate's this, it's a game-winning thing. So being able to kind of just work within this design space, be a little more effective with it, I definitely understand that that is something that, again, these are challenging cards to design, so that can be something that can really help them out by saying, okay, let's limit it to just 1 in general per set. But as we were saying already, they're like, okay, well, Alice Thunder Junction. Well, Oko's there, but also Jace. Let's throw that in there. And then also, again, leaks, so not officially confirmed, but with Modern Horizons, we're already seeing, all right, a Johnny as a flip walker, and then potentially, let me see if I get it right again, Grist, Tamio, Soren Markov, and Ral. All flip walkers as well, potentially, in that set. Make sure you check that episode if you haven't seen that yet, and determine for yourself if you think that those are real. But yeah, already seeing that they're maybe a little loose on, again, that general rule of 1 per set. So we'll probably end up with, if I have to guess, moving forward, like per year, maybe around 10 or so. So like initially, like we had, 4 or 5 per year. And then we got to like 20 per year, probably on average, maybe a little more than that. And then obviously 63 in that one year, which was ridiculous. But being down to around probably 10 per year or so, I think, allows them to really focus on that. And I do think that's probably a good thing, personally. Again, and that's coming from someone who, again, admittedly is not a fan of Planeswalkers. I don't really play with them in my own decks too often, if ever. And I'm not really a fan too much of strategies that are just, I play a ton of Planeswalkers and wipe the board again to protect my team, which is an effective strategy, and that's probably the right strategy for Planeswalkers. But yeah, it's interesting in how they're moving forward with this permanent type and how they are, again, making different kinds of permanent types. Again, like we talked about Sagas, which is kind of like a fixed Planeswalker in a way, because it takes off the mental load of the player and also opponents too. And then also kind of like battles. They're trying with different kinds of permanent types now, so they're not just kind of throwing all these ideas potentially into what a Planeswalker does, but they're also just changing it to, okay, now we have these other kind of avenues that we're going in, and we've got different directions that we can utilize. Again, we've seen Sagas more often than I thought we'd be seeing them. I'm assuming battles are going to be coming back at some point. I'd say this year, probably, maybe next year. But yeah, I'd be pretty excited to see kind of how they work within those as well. I mean, we've seen like battle sieges. Now, what other kinds of battles are going to be? Really cool. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that are huge fans of Planeswalkers and love seeing Planeswalkers, but kind of like, again, the Gandalf thing. Like, do you really need like 3 Okos in a year? Probably not. Like, you know, so we shall see. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on all this, though. Again, I don't appreciate the people out there who are like, Mark lied. Mark said, you know, that there's only 1%. We're already, like, out of that already. Wow. I mean, everyone misspeaks, you know, at some point, okay? Like, Mark was just, like, on live stream at the time, or, you know, at that event, essentially, and just happened to misspeak without saying it being a general 1% versus, like, you know, multiple. Mark wasn't lying. Mark just misspoke, okay? And general moving forward, all right? So, yeah, I do think it's an interesting change with Magic. I think it is a good change with Magic moving forward. I don't know if I like the change if it's like, you know, like, oh, we're doing this so we can open up more space for just more legendary creatures, because I don't think we need, again, like kind of like Planeswalkers, I hope they take down the number of commanders per set as well. And that's something they have discussed doing, except in Universes Beyond for some reason. But I think that we could utilize that just a little less per year would be great. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on all this in the comments below. Where do you stand when it comes to Planeswalkers and decreasing the number again? I think pretty significantly, you know, down to just 1% potentially on average, or not on average, but in general. What's your opinion on that? What's your opinion on the direction of Magic moving forward with this? And yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on all this. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.